It's funny how sometimes the best advice comes from the most unexpected places, right? Like you've got that one friend, maybe a little quirky, but they always seem to have this knack for making even the dullest topics interesting. Well, that's kind of what we're going for here, trying to bring that same energy to the world of money. And today we're really diving deep, exploring how our minds, yeah, our own thoughts and feelings, can either be our greatest asset or, unfortunately, our biggest downfall when it comes to building wealth. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's kick things off with a bit of a thought experiment, something to ponder. When you think about money, what's the first story that pops into your head?
You've hit the nail on the head with that question. See, that's precisely what we're exploring today, the psychology of money. It's not just about crunching numbers or memorizing formulas. It's about understanding those hidden biases we all have and the stories we tell ourselves about wealth, about success, about what it all means.
And sometimes those stories, they can be incredibly powerful, even when they seem a bit, well, counterintuitive. Like, take the story of Ronald Reid, for example. Here's a guy, a janitor by profession, who amassed a serious fortune. We're talking millions. And how did he do it? Simple, patient investing. No fancy Ivy League degree, just discipline and a commitment to the long game.
He's a prime example of how our money stories can play out in unexpected ways. And then you have someone like Richard Fuscone, a Harvard MBA, a multimillionaire at one point. But then he lost it all. Get caught up in risky decisions driven by, well, let's just call it greed. Two very different stories, two very different outcomes.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Two intelligent individuals, but their relationship with money, the narratives they were living out, led them down drastically different paths. And it's not always about intelligence or even access to opportunities. It's often about those deep-seated beliefs we carry, those money scripts that we might not even be aware of. Think about it. Someone who grew up seeing prices skyrocketing during hyperinflation will have a completely different perspective on risk and reward compared to someone who's only known a stable economy.
That's precisely what Housel argues in The Psychology of Money. Our personal experiences with money are far more influential than any textbook or financial advice we could ever receive. It's those first-hand encounters, the successes, the failures, that shape our beliefs and ultimately our actions. Imagine for a moment the stockbroker who lived through the Great Depression, the entrepreneur who rode the wave of the dot-com boom, the family living in a country that's never experienced a recession. Each of these individuals carries a unique money story, a lens through which they view the world of finance.
It's like we're all wearing these invisible money goggles, shaping how we interpret and react to financial information. And these goggles, they're not just influenced by major economic events, like a stock market crash or a global recession. They're molded by everyday experiences, by the messages we received about money growing up, by the financial habits we observed in our families. Did your parents struggle to make ends meet, or were they always comfortable financially? Those early experiences leave a lasting imprint.
Absolutely. Those early experiences, they form the foundation of our financial beliefs, our attitudes toward risk, our definition of success. And here's the thing. Those beliefs might lead us to make decisions that seem completely irrational to someone else but make perfect sense within our own personal narrative.
It's like we're all operating from our own unique financial playbooks, written by our experiences and shaped by our emotions. So before we go any further, let's take a moment, a pause, to reflect. What's your money story? What are those underlying narratives you're carrying around? And are they empowering you to build the financial future you envision, or are they holding you back?
It's a powerful question. And honestly, it's one that we should all be asking ourselves because
Yeah.
those stories, whether we realize it or not, are shaping our financial journeys every step of the way.
Mm.
And, speaking of money stories, it's amazing how much our views on things like retirement, even the whole idea of college, have changed, like really rapidly when you think about it historically.
You're saying those concepts are relatively new, like in the grand scheme of things?
Oh, absolutely. For instance, the 401k, that thing everyone talks about for retirement, didn't even exist until 1978. That's not that long ago. And Roth IRAs, even more recent. We're talking late 1990s.
Wow, yeah, when you put it that way, it is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, these financial tools, we just assume they've always been there, right? Like, it's no wonder people find saving for retirement so daunting.
Right. It's like we're all figuring this out as we go. There's no roadmap, no guarantee. We're kind of like financial pioneers in a way,
Yeah.
navigating this totally new terrain.
Trying to read a map that's still being drawn, as they say.
Exactly. And that's why, being adaptable, being open to new information, it's more critical now than ever. We can't just rely on what worked for our parents. because the game's changed.
So if we're essentially writing the rules as we go along, how do we even begin to navigate this new financial landscape?
Well, Housel, he makes a good point. He says, learn from the past, but don't be bound by it. He uses the example of Benjamin Graham.
Benjamin Graham. Wait, wasn't he Warren Buffett's mentor? The intelligent investor guy?
That's the one. A legend, right. But here's the thing. Housel points out that a lot of Graham's specific formulas for investing, they don't quite hold up in today's market.
Really? What happened? Did his ideas just become irrelevant?
Not necessarily. See, Housel argues that Graham, he was a pragmatist at heart. He understood that markets, they're constantly evolving. So he wasn't fixated on this rigid set of rules. He adapted his approach as the financial landscape shifted.
So it's more about being flexible, about recognizing that what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow, right? We have to adjust our strategies as the markets change.
Now you're getting it. Blindly following some old formula. It's like setting your GPS to your old address. You might get there eventually, but it's not going to be pretty, and you're probably going to hit a lot of detours along the way.
It's like driving with blinders on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Investing, it's not a passive activity. It requires us to be engaged, to be learning and adapting constantly. You got to stay one step ahead.
So we've got to become students of the market, always studying, always evolving our approach.
Yes, now you're speaking my language. That's what makes it exciting. It's a continuous learning process. There's always something new to discover, a new challenge to tackle.
Okay, so we've talked about this constantly evolving financial landscape, the importance of being adaptable, but let's shift gears a bit. Housel also delves into the roles of luck and risk, two factors that, let's be honest, can make or break our financial success. So where do these concepts fit into the bigger picture?
Well, Housel, he's not afraid to admit it. He says we often underestimate just how big of a role luck plays in both our successes and, yeah, our failures too. We love to take credit when things go well, attributing it to our skills, our hard work, our brilliance, right? But when things go south, oh, it's bad luck, it's the market, it's some external factor outside of our control.
Because it's way more comfortable for our egos to believe we're the masters of our own destiny, right?
Precisely. But let's be real, luck plays a much bigger role than we might want to admit. Take Bill Gates, for example.
The Microsoft guy.
The one and only. Look, no one can deny his genius. The guy's brilliant, hardworking, driven. But even he'll tell you he was incredibly lucky. He happened to be in the right place at the right time with access to resources that most people could only dream of.
So are you saying that success is all just a roll of the dice? That our efforts, our hard work doesn't really matter?
Not at all. Hard work, dedication, they're essential, no doubt. But they don't guarantee success. There's always that element of chance, of being in the right place at the right time that can tip the scales. And we have to acknowledge that, embrace it even.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But then how do we factor that into our financial planning? If luck is such a wild card, how do we plan for it?
It's not so much about planning for luck, but more about acknowledging the role of risk and preparing for the unexpected. Housel, he uses this analogy of a barbell.
A barbell, like the weightlifting kind.
You got it. He says we should approach our finances like a barbell, with one side representing safety and security, those low-risk investments, and the other side representing risk and potential for high growth.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Having a portion of our money in those safe, conservative investments, and then another portion in, let's say, more volatile investments with the potential for bigger rewards.
Now you're thinking like an investor. That's diversification in a nutshell, not putting all your eggs in one basket. That way, even if one side goes down, you still got the other side to balance it out.
It's like having a financial safety net, something to catch you if you fall.
Exactly. Diversification is key to managing risk. It's fundamental, really, to any solid financial plan.
So it sounds like when it comes to building wealth, we need to be both lucky and smart.
I like the way you think. We can't control the luck factor entirely, but we can definitely increase our odds by making smart decisions, managing our risk effectively, and never, ever underestimating the power of a little bit of luck.
And that brings us back to embracing uncertainty, doesn't it? Life throws curveballs, markets crash, unexpected expenses pop up. We can't control everything, but we can control how we react.
Absolutely. It's about resilience, about having the flexibility to adjust our plans, to roll with the punches.
It's like they say, the best laid plans often go awry.
Words to live by. Having a plan is great, essential even, But it's even more important to have a plan that can adapt, that can bend without breaking when things don't go exactly as expected.
So it's about building a strong financial foundation that can weather any storm, right?
Now you're talking. A foundation built on knowledge, on diversification, and on a healthy dose of realism, knowing that the unexpected is just part of the journey.
This has been incredibly insightful. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, though. Now, I'm curious about the role of happiness in all of this. I mean, money's important, but it's not the only thing that matters, right? So how does it fit into our overall well-being? How do we find that balance between financial security and, actually enjoying life?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Housel, he's got some interesting thoughts on this. He argues that true wealth, it's not just about the size of your bank account. It's about using your resources, both financial and otherwise, to create a life that's meaningful, a life that brings you joy.
Because ultimately, money can buy you experiences, it can buy you freedom, it can buy you security, all of which can contribute to happiness, right?
Exactly. But here's the catch. He's also quick to point out that money and happiness, they're not always directly proportional. You can be rich without being wealthy, and you can be wealthy without being rich.
Okay, so there's a difference.
It's a big one. Being rich, that's about having a lot of money, right? But being wealthy, that's about having financial freedom. It's about having options. It's about not being constantly stressed or worried about money. It's about having enough, whatever enough means to you, to live the life you want, to pursue your passions, to spend time with loved ones without constantly checking your bank balance.
So you can have a high income, a fancy car, a big house, but still not be truly wealthy.
It happens all the time, unfortunately. People get caught up in the rat race, chasing more, but they're not really living. They're just accumulating stuff, and often that stuff ends up owning them.
So true wealth, it's about having that financial cushion that allows you to actually live your life, to pursue your passions, to enjoy the moment without constantly stressing about money.
Now you're getting it. It's about aligning your financial decisions with your values, with what truly matters to you. It's about finding that sweet spot where financial security and personal fulfillment intersect.
It's about defining success on your own terms, not letting society dictate it for you.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, what's important to me? Is it spending more time with loved ones? Is it traveling the world? Is it giving back to my community? Once you figure out what truly matters, you can start aligning your financial decisions with those values.
And that, to me, sounds like a recipe for a much more fulfilling and, dare I say, happier life, regardless of how much money you have in the bank.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance, that sense of purpose and fulfillment that goes beyond just the numbers.
Speaking of purpose, something that really stood out to me in the psychology of money was Housel's observation about how our spending habits, the things we choose to buy, they often reflect a much deeper desire, this need for social status and validation.
Oh, absolutely. It's the classic keeping up with the Joneses phenomena. It's subtle, it's pervasive, and it's incredibly powerful.
It really is. He talks about his experience as a valet, parking cars for a living, and he noticed this pattern. People would arrive in these flashy, expensive cars, clearly wanting to be noticed, wanting to project this image of success.
And what's fascinating is that this craving for external validation, it often leads to, well, let's just say, less than stellar financial decisions.
Because we end up buying things we don't need, can't afford, just to impress people we don't even like.
It's a trap, isn't it? And it's even more pronounced now with social media.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with images of people living these seemingly perfect lives with their perfect bodies, perfect relationships, and of course their perfect finances. It's easy to get caught up in that, to feel like we need to keep up, even if it means going into debt or sacrificing our long-term financial well-being.
So how do we break free from that cycle? How do we find contentment without feeling the pressure to have the latest gadget, the biggest house, the fanciest car?
It starts with a shift in perspective. Housel, he's got this great quote. He says, "True wealth is what you don't see." In other words, it's about finding contentment in what you already have, in the experiences you can afford, in the relationships that bring you joy. It's about defining success on your own terms, not letting society dictate it for you.
So it's about tuning out the noise, the external pressures, and really getting clear on what truly matters to you.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that happiness, it doesn't come from keeping up with the Joneses. It comes from finding contentment and gratitude in your own unique journey.
It's about marching to the beat of your own drum, not letting the rhythm of someone else's life dictate your own.
Now you're talking. It's about creating a life that's authentically you, a life that aligns with your values, your passions, and yes, your budget. And that, my friend, is a recipe for true wealth and happiness.
Well said. It's about embracing your own financial journey, not someone else's. And that brings us to another important distinction, that Housel makes the difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Ah, yes, that's a crucial one. It's a distinction that a lot of people miss.
Because we often use those terms interchangeably, right?
Yeah.
But Housel, he argues there's a fundamental difference.
There is. Being rich, it's fleeting. It's about having a lot of money at a particular moment in time. But being wealthy, that's something far more enduring. It's about having the freedom to make choices, to control your time, to pursue your passions without being shackled to a paycheck.
So you can be rich without being wealthy and vice versa.
Absolutely. You can have a high income, a fancy car, all the trappings of wealth. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you're constantly stressed about money, you're not truly wealthy.
So true wealth, it's not about the number in your bank account. It's about the freedom and security that money can provide.
Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
It's about having options. It's about having peace of mind. It's about not being a slave to your finances.
It's about being in the driver's seat of your financial life, not letting money take the wheel.
That's a great way to put it. It's about taking control of your money, understanding how it works, and making it work for you, not the other way around.
And that's something that anyone can achieve, right? You don't need to be a millionaire to start building wealth.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Wealth building, it's not just for the privileged few. It's about developing good financial habits, no matter your income level. It's about saving diligently, investing wisely, and making informed decisions about your money. It's about playing the long game and not getting sidetracked by short-term market fluctuations or the latest get-rich-quick schemes.
So it's about focusing on what we can control, our savings rate, our investment strategies, our spending habits, and not getting caught up in things we can't control, like the stock market's daily whims.
You've got it. It's about having a plan, being disciplined, and staying the course, even when things get bumpy. Because, let's face it, there will be bumps along the way. But if you've got a solid financial foundation, you'll be able to weather any storm.
And that's a comforting thought, isn't it? Knowing that even though we can't predict the future, we can prepare for it. And speaking of preparation, one point that really struck me in the psychology of money was Housel's emphasis on the importance of, well, pessimism.
Pessimism. Now that's an interesting one. I can already see the headlines. Financial expert recommends pessimism for a happy life.
I know, right? It sounds a bit counterintuitive, especially in a conversation about money, but hear me out, because Housel makes a compelling case. He argues that a healthy dose of pessimism can actually be a good thing when it comes to making sound financial decisions.
So it's not about being a doom and gloom pessimist, constantly expecting the worst to happen, but about having a healthy sense of skepticism, of being prepared for the unexpected.
Exactly. He points out that we, as humans, we have this natural tendency to be overly optimistic, especially about the future. We underestimate risks, we overestimate our abilities, and we assume that things will always go according to plan. And when it comes to our finances, that kind of thinking can be, well, dangerous.
It's like we're wearing those rose-colored glasses, seeing the world through this overly optimistic lens, ignoring the very real possibility that things could go wrong. And then, when they inevitably do, we're caught off guard, unprepared, and frankly, a little bit panicked.
It's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It might look good at first, but the moment the storm hits, it all comes crumbling down.
That's a perfect analogy. A healthy dose of pessimism, or let's call it realism, can help us build a much stronger financial foundation, one that can withstand the inevitable storms that life throws our way.
So how do we practically incorporate this, let's call it realistic optimism, into our financial planning? What does that look like in action?
It starts with acknowledging that negative events, setbacks, unexpected expenses, they're not just possibilities, they're probabilities. They're part of life. And pretending they won't happen to us, well, that's just setting ourselves up for disappointment.
So ditch the rose-colored glasses, embrace the possibility of setbacks, but don't let that paralyze us from taking action.
Now you're getting it. It's not about letting fear dictate our decisions, but about acknowledging risks, managing them effectively, and having a plan B and maybe even a plan C, just in case.
Because, as they say, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Words to live by, my friend. A healthy dose of realism combined with a solid financial plan, that's the key to weathering any storm and coming out stronger on the other side.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of being realistic, but how do we balance that with not being completely terrified of the future. I mean, we don't want to be so pessimistic that we're too scared to take any risks or enjoy our money, right?
That's a great point. It's all about finding that balance, that sweet spot between being cautiously optimistic and, well, completely delusional. Housel, he calls it being a rational optimist.
A rational optimist. I like that. What does that look like in practice?
It's about being optimistic about the long-term potential of the economy, of the markets, of your own ability to build wealth. But it's also about being realistic about the risks involved, about the fact that there will be bumps along the way, that not every investment will be a home run.
So it's about tempering our optimism with a healthy dose of realism, about being hopeful but not naive.
Exactly. And it's about having a long-term perspective, not getting too caught up in the market's daily ups and downs or letting short-term setbacks derail our long-term goals.
It's about staying focused on the big picture, the long game, even when things get a little bit messy in the short term.
Now you're thinking like a seasoned investor. It's about tuning out the noise, staying the course, and trusting that over time, consistency and discipline will win out over trying to time the market or chase the latest hot stock tip.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. The evolving financial landscape, the roles of luck and risk, the importance of being both realistic and optimistic, and the difference between being rich and being wealthy. But there's one more element that I want to circle back to, and that's the power of narrative, the stories we tell ourselves about money.
Ah, yes, those stories. They're incredibly powerful, aren't they? They shape our beliefs, our expectations, and ultimately our actions.
They really do. And Housel, he does a great job of highlighting how these narratives, they're not just personal, they're often shaped by the world around us, by the stories we hear from our families, our friends, the media even.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you're constantly bombarded with stories of people getting rich quick, of overnight successes in the stock market, of people winning the lottery, it's easy to start believing that that's the norm, that financial success is just a matter of luck or timing. And that can lead to some pretty risky financial behavior.
Like investing in meme stocks or sinking your life savings into the latest cryptocurrency craze.
Exactly. On the other hand, if you grew up during a recession, if you constantly heard stories of people losing their jobs, their homes, their life savings, you might develop a scarcity mindset around money, a belief that there's never enough to go around, which can lead to hoarding behaviors and an aversion to risk.
So the stories we're exposed to, they really can have a profound impact on our financial behaviors, often without us even realizing it.
They're incredibly influential. That's why it's so important to be aware of the narratives that are shaping our thinking, to question those stories, and to seek out diverse perspectives.
It's about being critical consumers of information, not just accepting everything we hear at face value, whether it's from our parents, our friends, or even the so-called financial experts.
Precisely. And it's about being mindful of the stories we're telling ourselves about money, about wealth, about success. Are those stories empowering us, or are they holding us back?
It's about recognizing that we have the power to rewrite those narratives, to create a new story, one that's aligned with our values, our goals, and our vision for the future.
Now you're talking. It's about taking control of our money stories and creating a new chapter, one that's filled with financial freedom, abundance, and joy.
I love that. It's about becoming the authors of our own financial destinies.
And that's a story worth writing.
We've talked about the power of narrative, but what about the role of history? Housel seems to emphasize the importance of understanding financial history, but he also cautions against relying too heavily on the past.
He does. He makes this really interesting point about how history can be both informative and, well, misleading.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, understanding financial history, it's like having access to this treasure trove of knowledge, right? It can teach us how markets have behaved in the past, how people have reacted to different economic events, and what strategies have worked well or haven't. But here's the thing, the world is constantly changing. What worked in the past might not necessarily work in the future.
So we can't just assume that history will repeat itself.
That's exactly right. Blindly following historical patterns, it's like trying to drive a car while only looking in the rearview mirror. You might be able to see where you've been, but it doesn't do you much good when you're trying to navigate what's ahead.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Learning from the past, but not being chained to it.
Precisely. Housel, he used the example of the dot-com bubble in the late 1990s.
Oh yeah, when tech stocks were skyrocketing and everyone thought they were going to be millionaires overnight.
Exactly. And a lot of people, they bought into the hype. They thought the old rules of valuation, they no longer applied. They thought this time was different, that tech companies were somehow immune to the laws of gravity.
And we all know how that story ended.
Not well. The bubble burst, the market crashed, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. It was a harsh reminder that even in a new era, with new technologies and new possibilities, the fundamental principles of finance still apply.
So it's about being aware of historical patterns, about understanding how markets have behaved in the past, but also being adaptable, being willing to adjust our strategies as the world evolves, as new technologies emerge, as the financial landscape shifts.
Now you're thinking like a true student of the market. It's about being a lifelong learner, always adapting, always evolving our approach.
It's about learning from the past, but not letting it define our future.
Now that's a motto to live by.
This deep dive has been full of insightful advice. It's amazing how much ground we've covered, and yet I feel like there's still so much more to unpack. Now, I'm curious about the role of emotions in all of this. Housel, he seems to suggest that emotions play a much larger role in our financial decisions than we might realize.
Oh, absolutely. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, especially when it comes to money. But the reality is we're driven by emotions. And those emotions can either be our greatest allies or our worst enemies when it comes to making financial decisions.
Because we're human, not robots.
Exactly. We're wired to feel, and those feelings, they can be intense, especially when it comes to money. We feel fear when the market takes a nosedive, greed when we see others getting rich, and sometimes even a sense of shame when we make a financial mistake.
And all too often, those emotions, they lead us to make decisions that we later regret.
It happens to the best of us. We sell our investments at the bottom of the market because we're afraid of losing everything, or we jump on the latest investment bandwagon because we don't want to miss out on the next big thing.
So how do we manage these emotions? How do we keep our cool when the market's doing its best roller coaster impression?
Well, it starts with awareness. The first step is to acknowledge that emotions are part of the game. Don't try to fight them. Don't pretend they don't exist. Instead, learn to identify those moments when your emotions are running high and might be clouding your judgment.
So it's about becoming more emotionally intelligent, about recognizing our emotional triggers and developing strategies to manage those emotions effectively.
Exactly. And one of the most effective strategies is to simply take a step back, to pause before reacting. When you feel that surge of fear, that urge to sell everything, or that wave of greed, that need to buy into the hype, take a deep breath, walk away from your computer, and give yourself some time to cool down.
Because often our initial emotional reactions, they're not always the most rational ones.
You got it. We need to give ourselves time to process, to think things through logically, to consult with a trusted advisor if needed, before making any major financial decisions.
It's about not letting our emotions make decisions for us, especially when it comes to something as important as our finances.
Precisely. And it's about remembering that investing, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's about patience, it's about discipline, and it's about not letting our emotions derail our long-term financial goals.
So stay calm, stay focused, and trust the process.
Now you're talking. And remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're not sure what to do, don't hesitate to reach out to a financial advisor. A good advisor can provide objective guidance, help you develop a solid financial plan, and most importantly, act as a sounding board when your emotions are running high.
It's like having a financial therapist, someone to help you navigate those emotional landmines that often trip us up when it comes to money.
I like that. Because ultimately, managing our finances, it's not just about crunching numbers and analyzing spreadsheets. It's about understanding ourselves, our emotions, and how those emotions influence our financial decisions.
It's about developing a healthy relationship with money, one that's based on knowledge, awareness, and yes, a little bit of emotional intelligence.
Now you're talking. It's about taking control of our money instead of letting it control us.
You know, it's interesting how we often focus on the practical side of money saving, investing, budgeting. But what about the emotional side of money? It's something we don't always talk about, but it plays a huge role in our financial lives.
Absolutely. Money is tied to some of our deepest emotions: security, fear, even guilt. Think about it. Have you ever felt anxious about checking your bank balance, or guilty about splurging on something you really wanted?
Oh, totally. I think we all have. It's like money has this sneaky way of tapping into our insecurities and anxieties, even when we're trying to be rational about it.
Exactly. And that's why Housel talks about the importance of developing a healthy relationship with money. It's not about judging ourselves for our financial decisions or comparing ourselves to others. It's about viewing money as a tool that can help us build the lives we want.
So instead of letting money control us, we need to learn to control our money, right?
Precisely. And that starts with awareness. Recognize those moments when your emotions are driving your financial decisions. Are you making an impulse purchase because you're feeling insecure? Are you avoiding investing because you're afraid of losing money? Once you understand the emotional factors at play, you can start to make more conscious and empowered choices.
That's such a crucial point. It's like we need to become financial therapists for ourselves, uncovering those deep-seated beliefs and patterns that are holding us back.
Right, and sometimes it might even require questioning the messages we've received about money since childhood. Did you grow up believing money was scarce? Or that talking about money was taboo? These early experiences can shape our financial beliefs for years to come.
It's like those money goggles we talked about earlier, except these are more like money blind spots, things we don't even realize are influencing our behavior.
Exactly. But once you become aware of those blind spots,
Yeah.
you can start to challenge them. And that's where the real transformation begins.
Okay, so we've talked about the emotional side of money, but I'm curious, what are some practical steps we can take to develop a healthier relationship with our finances?
One powerful practice is to define your values and priorities. What's truly important to you? Spending time with loved ones, pursuing your passions, making a difference in the world. Once you have a clear understanding of your values, you can align your financial decisions accordingly.
That makes so much sense. It's like creating a financial roadmap that's guided by your values, not by societal pressures or fleeting desires.
Exactly. And as you start making financial choices that are in alignment with your values, you'll likely find that you feel more content and fulfilled, even if you're not earning a six-figure salary.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where financial security meets personal fulfillment, and that looks different for everyone.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to personal finance. It's about finding what works for you, your values, and your goals. And that might require some experimentation and adjustments along the way.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation, so many practical insights and actionable takeaways. But I think the most important message I'm taking away from today's deep dive is that personal finance is deeply personal. It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about understanding ourselves, our values, and our relationship with money.
I couldn't agree more. And that's the beauty of the psychology of money. It encourages us to look beyond the balance sheet and explore the deeper meaning of wealth, both financially and personally.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. What stories are you telling yourself about money? Are they empowering you to achieve your goals or holding you back? Take some time to reflect on your financial narratives and see if they need a rewrite.
And remember, building a healthy relationship with money is a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your successes, and learn from your mistakes. You've got this.
Until next time, happy diving.